Welcome back to my channel. Wendy Renee here. So excited to have you. I took a few weeks off creating content and it was a much needed break to do things with my family and my kids. And now we're getting into the new year. We have new content planned for you and let's get right into it. I'm really excited to introduce you to Andrew. It's an honor to have him on the show, to have him so unafraid to tell what it is that he's been through and what he's currently struggling with. And again, as always, remember we find each other in our stories. And that's the whole point of this channel. Enough of this intro, let's go. Andrew, it's such an honor to have you on the Devout Show. Thank you so much for coming on. So why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and give us just a bit of your backstory so we can get to know you.
All right. Well, hey guys, my name's Andrew. 26 years old, third generation Jehovah's Witness. So a little bit about me. I was born in 95. Obviously born into the religion, third generation Jehovah's Witnesses. Both my grandpas, my dad's dad and my mom's dad were both elders. Both became Jehovah's Witnesses from receiving a knock on a door, I think sometime in the late 50s, early 60s, around that time. And the rest is history. That they raised my parents as Jehovah's Witnesses. They stayed in it. My dad ended up becoming an elder, and then my parents raised me and my brother in it as well. And my brother currently is on track to become an elder. He's currently a ministerial servant right now. And so we started off when we were really young, going to the Spanish congregation because that's where my parents went. But me and my brother, we didn't really. I speak Spanish fluently myself now as an adult, but as a child, it was kind of difficult for me to understand anything. So because of that, when we were me and my brother are about a year and a half apart. So when we were about 8, 9 years old, they decided to move us to the English congregation. So we ended up going to this West LA congregation in like Culver City-ish area, West LA area. It's actually the congregation. I used to see Prince there a couple times, believe it or not. I sat next to, called him Brother Nelson a few times.
Oh, wow.
And so did Larry Graham of Graham Central Station. He would pop in and do some on Sunday, give the discourse. But anyways, that was the transition to English Hall. And then and it was different in the Spanish Hall. There wasn't really like as much of a push for like the really, really, really young kids to get baptized and to start participating in the theocratic ministry school. But I noticed in the English, like it was not unheard of for like an 8, 9 to 11-year-old to be getting baptized, which is just crazy to me. But there was a lot of that in our hall. So a lot of the kids my age, when I was about 9, 10 years old, a lot of them were already getting ready to get baptized. At that point, I was just a publisher. I never, really, because I grew up in the Spanish, it was always just felt like a drag. I didn't really understand what was being said. So having been forced to go to these Kingdom Halls 3 times a week in service, and really it was just kind of a nightmare situation. And I was put in a lot of, like, looking back, I was put in a lot of dangerous situations, like knocking on doors in really bad neighborhoods and in the Culver City projects. And by myself as a kid, we got robbed a couple times going door to door in those areas. And something children should never have to. It's just crazy how many times grown adult men would chase me and another child off of their front. Or, I mean, it's just insane, the stuff that we had to do and not really understand why we were doing it. But at the time, I just did it because that's what my whole family did. My brother, my uncles, aunts, grandparents, everyone in my family to this day is still witnesses. I'm the only one that is not a member. So that being said, by the time I was like, I don't know, 12, 13, I started just questioning everything and never really found adequate answers. And by the time I was 14, 15, I was like, I want out. I told all the elders that I wanted nothing to do with the organization, and they would send elders over to my house left and right. And it just pushed me away even more. And at the time, the chairman, or the head elder who was leading most of the theocratic school, his name was Jeff Rose. And he was actually a teacher in the school district that I went to, which was Culver City Unified School District. And so he had a major impression on me as far as like getting me to get baptized. He was really, really pushing the children to get indoctrinated into this situation. And I always got really bad energy from him. And I always noticed he was really inappropriate with the way he like touched the girls and would hug them and give them kisses. Come to find out, I Googled, because I heard he got fired from his job as a teacher a couple of years back. And I Googled, this elder's name, Jeff Rose. Culver City Unified School District. And sure enough, his whole court case was why he was fired was because he couldn't refrain himself from inappropriately touching his students. And it had happened on like 6 different occasions and received multiple warnings. And this is all public information. Any Jehovah's Witness that goes to that hall can Google their elder's name and see all those court cases. But of course, they choose not to. And yeah, so it's quite disturbing the more and more I look into it as I get older. Because when I left, I didn't really I wasn't really a part of the ExJw community. I was just a teenager trying to do teenager things. But now as an adult in my 20s, the more in my later 20s, the more I look into it, I think it's bringing a lot of PTSD out as I get older, and I try to find ways to deal with it. But it's really difficult. And so I'm really, really blessed to have found this community, like someone like yourself, Floyd Evans, this XJW community is just, it really, really makes me want to get into the activism. I've never really felt that like passion for something other than like music and things like that for this activism. So I really hope to be a part of it someday.
Well, you are now by coming on the channel, that's for sure. Yeah. I'm sure where you live, there are quite a few who need someone who's local and someone who's been through what you've been through. If I may just back up, so you were never baptized, right?
Never. My brother was at an early age, and everyone was kind of looking at me because he's my younger brother, like, yo, why is your younger brother getting baptized and you're still not? And like I said, I had my doubts, and I knew even at that age, at like 13, 14, like if I pull the trigger on this thing, everyone's forcing me to do, like this is going to have really bad consequences, because I was already pulling back then at that point. So I kind of knew at that point, like, no, if I do this, it's going to be when I'm an adult and I know this is the right choice for me. And
do you remember when we were younger, when we were about that age, there were articles that came out and they said that even if you don't get baptized and it's the truth, you're still doing something wrong. They say that once you know it's the truth, whether you're baptized or not, you're still responsible. So what was that like for you? Because I'm sure in the audience, we have a lot of unbaptized publishers who think that they don't have a story.
Right. No, this is the thing. I mean, so I've lost 3 out of my 4 grandparents that were all witnesses, obviously, at the time of them dying. And all 3 of them on their deathbed told me, surrounded by family, that I need to get baptized or I won't be with them in paradise the day before, or the week before they died. All 3 of them. So, and this is, so it's that sort of pressure that, like, it doesn't really matter if you're baptized or not. Like, you will be put in situations like that, regardless of your status of baptism or not, just depending on the structure, your family structure, or who is in the organization that is close to you. You might find yourself in situations like that. And so, yeah, definitely know you're not alone. A lot of us go through that regardless of being baptized or not, and obviously me not being baptized, obviously, like you mentioned, I didn't get the full disfellowshipping, shunning thing. But do you think any of my friends from the Jehovah's Witness organization reached out to me or anything like that? Of course not. Now, there were times that, like, obviously I got, I was a really depressed teenager and I suffered from chronic depression, and I got into alcohol really, really bad. I'm a recovering alcoholic now, 1 year sober. But in 2019, there's a lot to unpack here though. In 2019, it was so bad, just from the depression and PTSD and the trauma from like religion, that I was drinking every day, like a lot of hard liquor, to the point where I had developed like severe pancreatitis. And in 2019, I was hospitalized because I thought I was going to have a heart attack and my organs were failing. Long story short, I went into the hospital October 2019, and I went into a medically induced coma for 2 weeks because all my organs were failing. And thank God that I came out of it when I did, because right when I came out of it, like, I could barely talk. I had a trach in my throat. I can't move. The doctors were like, hey, you need plasma. You need blood for like this next procedure we're going to do, because you have a bunch of fluid in your abdomen we need to drain, and you need plasma for this next thing. And my parents had told the doctors that I could not take blood, even though I had never said that. I didn't have a no blood card. That wasn't my wishes. But it just freaks me out to think that, like, what if I hadn't woken up in that moment? What if I needed that plasma and they were the ones speaking for me? Like, that just is sickening to think about, honestly. And I have 2 uncles that are currently, or 1 uncle that is currently in the HLC. So I have family members in the HLC. So it's terrifying, honestly, to a lot of people, and they don't realize this because they're obviously so enthralled within the organization, but like it just does so much like mental and obviously physical damage to so many people that it just goes overlooked, and it's so scary to me, honestly.
So it's interesting that, you know, because there is a common misconception that if you're not baptized, you didn't get the full experience. Sure, you didn't go through the whole disfellowshipping process, but especially within the last decade, it sounds like they're doubling down on
Yep.
anyone who is just not associated with the organization anymore. So I don't know, you not being baptized, it sounds like you experience a lot of the same traumas that someone who was baptized would experience. When
Yeah.
you wrote in, you mentioned that you disassociated yourself. So you were at one point an unbaptized publisher. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So when I
Mhm.
moved to the English, when I was about
Mhm.
8 or 9, is when I forget it was so long ago. I forget exactly what the process was like, but when I moved to the English is
Right.
when I had officially become an unbaptized publisher.
You
And again,
announced
that
as no longer a publisher?
yes, I was announced, and my
Oh,
whole family was listening. Everyone was calling in, and I'm like, why would you call in to hear that announcement? I was gone doing whatever I was doing, not listening
mhm,
to it. But I get calls from the rest of
mhm,
my family, like, you heard the announcement, blah 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 blah, blah,
mhm.
And just, to this day, my family all still try to preach to me. I get invited to the memorial every year. I get anytime a loved, you know how Jehovah's Witnesses specifically like to, when tragedy strikes, is when Jehovah's Witnesses like to then,
Huh,
oh,
huh, yeah.
you can see your loved one again. So I still get that all the time. I recently I'm with this beautiful girlfriend I've had for 6 months. They try to preach to her too. It's just the never ending cycle, I feel. So, and I love my family, and I know that they're good people and they're just stuck in this situation. And I know my mom specifically, I can feel that there are times when I can tell she might have her doubts, but the Jehovah's Witnesses foster this idea that anyone speaking out or any XJW is this poison rot that's going to come in and intercept their spirituality. I mean, it's really just insane the way that they'll have you think us apostates, how we act and how we are and how they perceive us to be, when in reality we're just people trying to get better and live a normal life outside of this cult, essentially.
It's interesting you say that because I right before we got on the call, I just did an Instagram stories about how there is a common misconception that people who leave are out to destroy people's faith. We're out to, hold signs. We're out to pull people down, that we're hateful. And it's actually not true at all. In fact, would you agree that since you left, that you're a different person than you were on the inside, maybe more patient, maybe more loving, understanding all of the good things that you think you are on the inside? Would you agree to that?
Absolutely. And growing up, this was one thing I heard all the time. The Jehovah's Witnesses love to say like bad associations spoil
Oh,
useful
yeah,
habits, but
of course.
what they don't really tell you is that they're considering everyone outside of the organization bad association. So I
Hmm.
was of course taught that like I will never, my friends that I call my friends, they don't really care about me. And if I'm in a situation where I'm hurt, they're not going to be there for me. You know who will be there for me? The Jehovah's Witnesses. Well, lo and behold, when I was in the hospital in 2019, my good friends were the ones who were surrounded by I was surrounded by every day, right? So, it just kind of goes to
Wow.
show like, they have this concept of like you can't have any deeper relationship with people that are worldly, when all my deepest, most sincere, just intense relationships with the beautiful friends I've developed are
Mhm.
some of the strongest relationships you could imagine. And of course, we're all outside of the organization, and it's a shame that you limit yourself to this small group of people who are all being misled, and it's tough.
You mentioned earlier, and thank you for being honest and open about it, because I know that there are people in the audience I know personally who are watching this who experience the same thing with regard to alcoholism and addiction. There was someone who commented on one of my videos a couple of months ago mentioning that they had been struggling with alcoholism, but they didn't know what to do and how to move forward because they still were conflicted with the belief. Like they knew if they came forward to get help, they'd be disfellowshipped and then they're left alone to struggle with their addiction. So can you speak to that and how you're doing in your recovery and what all this looked like for you?
Well, I'll say this: I got the tracheotomy scars to prove the battle that I've gone through with addiction, and it's a never-ending one. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm cured of addiction. I'm a year into recovery, but that was after countless hospital visits, rehabs, man, so
Wow.
many near-death experiences. I couldn't even tell you. It's insane. But so yeah, I was not a casual problem drinker. I was a full-blown hard liquor alcoholic, like needed to wake up, couldn't sleep through the night, about as bad as it gets, right? So it took a while to get to that point. And obviously it's no secret that a lot of the people in Bethel are sexually repressed and they're alcoholics. I
Mhm.
mean, I've heard that from people who used to work in the infirmary at Bethel, that a lot of them have depression and suffer from alcoholism. And that's so many of us in today's world, regardless of religion or not. And the biggest thing, it's so hard for JWs to then, because like you said, the repercussions that come with being honest with yourself and trying to get better mean that you're now taken, everything is taken away from you, which is just so unfair. And just so again, my advice would be, first of all, you need to put yourself first before anything else, because this is your life, right? This is your life. You only get one, right? So you need to put yourself before the organization. You need to put your health. And if you know that you have a serious problem where it's becoming an everyday thing and you're having health repercussions, you will be so grateful that you began to tackle this issue before it got as bad as it got for me. So trust me, if you put it off, it gets so much worse. It's not just going to magically get better. You're not going to pray your addiction away as much as some people will have you believe. That AA and a lot of those faith-based things, a lot of them do work. And I'm not saying prayer doesn't work. Obviously it does, but this is within a structured program that is with the person getting better. That's the first and primary concern, versus in the organization, they have other motives. So I would suggest for someone who is struggling with that to really have an honest conversation with themselves as far as where they see themselves in the next year. Do you see yourself as an alcoholic still at Bethel, still sneaking around doing your thing? Or do you see yourself maybe stepping down for your position to deal with your mental health? Like where do you see yourself? How much do you value your mental health moving forward? You can't and it's kind of like a weird thing, because like you obviously can't, if your true intentions are to be a Bethelite and serve Jehovah with everything you can, then obviously alcohol is not going to mix with that. So already there is a conflict of interest, so it kind of already doesn't even make sense. Again, I would just say mental health comes first. There's no shame in, even if you feel like you're doing something wrong with your family, stepping back, looking at things from an outside perspective and getting your health in line. Obviously there's so many mental health professionals in the world, and there's so many of us relapsing and going through addiction right now, especially during the pandemic, that it's more important than ever to, schedule a telehealth appointment with a therapist. That'll be confidential. No one will have to know about that. That's the first thing you can do. Come on to a show like I'm doing. This is my first time coming on to anything like this, and I can't tell you, in 20 minutes it's already more liberating than the conversations you'll have with somebody who doesn't understand. And
Right.
so talk to people who understand, embrace the community. And I would start with maybe a therapist that is going to keep things confidential. That's something you can do in the privacy of your own home or room, whatever it is. And most therapy sessions are telehealth anyway, so it's easier than ever to have a one-on-one session with a qualified therapist that won't share any of this. So that's what I would say should be step one. Obviously everyone's in their different position, so I wouldn't want to say anything too right or left, but just seek help before you worry about anything else, because you can't worry about anything else if your mind's constantly preoccupied of when your next drink's going to be, or that anxiety that comes with withdrawal, or all the negative things that come with being an alcoholic or an addict of any sort. It's very important that you love yourself enough to say, hey, I'm going to maybe step back from this position and make sure that I'm the best I can be, regardless of what you want to do after that point. That should be step one.
It sounds like, in the mind of someone who is a full believer and struggling with addiction. Now, again, this is clearly subject matter that I could be wrong. So correct me if I'm wrong. When you fully believe in the organization and you believe in the doctrine, there is that internal struggle of, I'm admitting I need help, but my conscience is bothering me to say it out loud. The chances of someone going to the elders before getting mental health when it comes, as it pertains to addiction, are very, very high. So would you
Right.
agree that unraveling the doctrine and no longer giving the elders the foremost authority on your life is one of the first steps?
Oh,
Um,
of course. Absolutely.
they would need to, right? Because there is
Absolutely.
that struggle of addiction, is it can get you disfellowshipped. So
Sure.
you kind of, you have this guilt complex.
No, I'm talk about guilt complex. I mean, I remember being like 15 years old, and this is back when, smartphones were coming out, and just the thought of Googling or YouTubing Jehovah's Witness would get the heart palpitating. Like, I'm not supposed to be doing this. It's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I totally relate to that feeling, and I do understand that. But understand, like, addiction is not something that the elders are going to be able to fix. They're not qualified. They're not addiction specialists. If they've never gone through it themselves, they probably don't know the struggle that you're facing, and they're simply just not qualified to deal with addiction. Addiction is its own separate entity that very few people are qualified to help administer help with. That's obviously something that you cannot leave to someone who is not qualified, and that's the bottom
The
line.
friend of mine, the one who had been on before, he's a big proponent of AA, just him individually. And one of
Sure.
the biggest struggles for him was, number one, it felt culty to him going to AA, and number two, I'll relink the video in the comments. He mentioned that when they talk about a higher power, that was a really big struggle for him. And so one of the things that, if you're watching this and you are struggling with that concept, completely understandable. But one of the things that he said that actually changed my perception of it is that, as long as it just can't be yourself. It could be anything, as long as it's not yourself. Andrew,
Sure.
I think you just found your activism niche, if I may.
Yeah.
We need you. We need people who have been through what you've been through and are currently going through what you're going through. They don't talk enough about this. They really don't.
Yeah, and it's a huge issue. Obviously, it's affects so many of us, and it's like I said, it's no one should feel shame for getting help. It's just for wanting to better themselves. I mean, just the idea that someone would be afraid to do that because of the repercussions is so backwards.
Mhm.
And people really need to hear that you know they're worth it, and that sometimes you do need to put yourself first. And it's baffling that that a lot of the elders would probably have you avoid seeing a therapist or talking to someone worldly about these issues, which is I it's hard to say anything. It's hard to imagine a situation in which you go to the elders with your addiction, and somehow they figure out a solution. Like, it's almost impossible for me to imagine the circumstance in which that works out.
Well, there would
It,
be the standard, pray more, you're not doing enough, go out in the ministry more. They're not licensed. This is, in addition to addiction, it's with any problem, really. I mean, even if
right.
you're having doubt, no matter what the issue is, the elders don't really know. It's just that we're trained to put them in such high regard. And listen, I'm a big proponent of, not all elders are these horrible men. They're just doing their best, but misguided, right? So
Right. And I mean, like,
they,
I love my father's an elder. I love my father. He's a hardworking man, and he
Mhm,
provided for his family. But at the end of the day, he didn't go to college, and he's a plumber. Like, these are the elders. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Like, this is a small example. Like Jeff Rose, the other example. This is a teacher doing these super questionable things. This man is the head elder. Like, it's yeah. And it's difficult. I try to talk to my family about, like, obviously there's all the things that, like, us XJWs talk about in regards to the actual, like, unraveling, like, the origins of the religion, as far as like Russell Rutherford and all that stuff. And it seems like they don't really want to hear any of that. Like, it seems like either they're not interested, or they just they don't know. It's really weird to me. It's like, wouldn't you want to know everything about this thing, as
Well,
far as
actually,
how it's
I could say that as a PME, I mean, I was a pioneer, and there were things I didn't even know about the origin of the religion that I professed was the actual true religion. It's not surprising to me at all that
Here's
they
one
don't
more
want
thing
to
I
know.
will say about too,
Yeah.
about if you're an alcoholic out there and you're in the organization. Rutherford was an alcoholic, just so you know. There were times when he had to be taken off the platform because he was just so drunk. So, you know, that's well documented, by the way.
I
So
think there's one in every congregation, and he's the OG. It sounds like. So, what does life look like for you now? You mentioned you had a girlfriend.
uh,
Are you going through the shunning process, and how you've reconciled all of
uh
this?
I still like have constant communication with my family.
Mhm.
My dad and my mom and brother ended up moving out of the English because of a bunch of drama. Obviously, there's always drama. So they moved
Mhm.
to the Portuguese congregation.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
they're doing their thing with the Portuguese. So yeah, I still see them. We obviously like it feels still obviously like we're watching a different movie every time I hang out with them. It's like we're not watching the same movie, but
Right.
they're my family and I love
Mhm.
them. And we for the most part we've figured out a way to just kind of like, I don't want to say make it work because it's not working. It's just kind of we're civil and like we don't, like they don't come over to my space and preach their thing and I don't go over to their space and do my, so it's kind of like
Right.
we keep that boundary, but we still communicate and everything. But whether we communicate or not, the fact that like when I look into their eyes and realize like we're just not even on the same page, and that, I try to talk to them about things that are really, really important to me that they just will immediately shut off. That aspect of life for my entire family is really difficult because I can't have a real conversation with my dad, my mom, my uncle, my aunt about how I feel, with my brother about how I feel in regards to my mental health or the organization or what I'm going through. These are why I have a therapist, why I have close friends. So with me, it's a little easier because I've developed all these connections outside of my family that are my outlets. But I really feel for those people who really don't have that, because there's so many people who, like you said, are disfellowshipped, shunned, and really don't have anything to
Anyone.
reach. I mean,
Anyone.
that's so scary. And just to any, if you find yourself in that situation, like so many of us, like you have the community and like there's a lot of us here. So
Yeah. Well, that was also step one, disfellowshipped or not, is find, and for people who are just waking up, find a
mhm.
community, which I mean takes tiptoeing, because you're programmed to thinking anybody who's not a witness is bad for you. So tiptoeing into like maybe one or two people, maybe a coworker or a schoolmate, whatever age group you're in, finding a community outside the JWs does make it a little more, um, I guess, palatable to leave. For me, I remember I met like one or two people and I felt conflicted. Why do I really relate to these people? I was asking myself, what is wrong with me that I'm relating to these people who are not Jehovah's Witnesses? And I thought that that was a sign that I wasn't spiritual enough, that I wasn't faithful enough. That must mean I'm now relating to the world, that I want to be part of the world. That was the one thing I had to unravel too, is I'm just a relatable person. That has nothing to do with whether or not I'm godly or not. And you don't think of these
It-
things when you're on the inside.
right. It's cool because they take it so serious and so, I mean, it's
Yeah.
like you can't take some, there's times where you can't take life that serious all the time and still be
Right.
like okay up here. Like, it's too
Right.
much. Like it's
Everything's
too
a
much.
big
You're talking
deal.
about, yeah. And so, naturally, like when I left, I was just seeking like, man, I just want to live a life where it's just not so serious. Like I can live my life, do things I want to do, and it's not so serious. It's not life or death. It's not, don't associate with them because they're all going to die in Armageddon. Don't do this because this is going to spoil your useful habits. It's just, so, ultimately you're talking to a guy who has the words "do not call" on his butt cheek tattooed. So
Are you serious?
yeah. I have a lot of tattoos though, so it's not like just there. It's like, yeah, I have tattoos everywhere. But
Oh, nice. Yes, I would love to get a sleeve eventually, for sure. I think it's awesome. Let's go back a decade because there were a lot of people in the audience who
Mhm.
are where you were when you started. What would you say to them? What would you say to your younger self 10 years ago?
Don't be afraid to do your own research as far as this organization. Apostates aren't these horrible people that the governing body tells you they are. In fact, I would consider looking into the governing body and who they are, how it was formed. Look into the date 1914, look into Russell, look into Rutherford, look into how these people lived, look into the fact that Rutherford owned a villa and luxury cars, yet he was telling people to sell all their belongings and wait to have kids because Armageddon was around the corner. Ask yourself why Jehovah's Witnesses have proclaimed the end of the world like 5 or 6 different times and have been wrong every time. Ask yourselves these questions and demand answers, because it's not fair that you don't get an answer to these things yet they expect you to conform to their way of life. That's not fair. these things deserve an answer. And I would really encourage looking into the organization on a deeper level. And don't be afraid to look at, obviously, the important outside sources. You know, they're going to tell you just to look at jw.org. No, there's plenty of outside information. JW Watch is a good one. These are ex-Bethelites using the actual scripture that Jehovah's Witnesses use to show contradictions and things like that. And there's a lot of great resources out there that they're afraid to have you use, and it's for a reason. It's for a reason. That's what I would have to say.
Thank you for that. It's also interesting that they're afraid to see how people are actually thriving on the outside of the organization, how people aren't actually dead in ditches. We're all resolving trauma and turmoil from what we grew up in, but the amount of people who are coming out and the healing process and just looking to just reach out and help other people is astonishing. How many people, especially during COVID, how many people are waking up. I can't wait for them to come out with the new numbers. Although I don't think they're going to be, I don't think they're going to be truly honest anyway, but it'd be interesting to see what they have to say.
As far as like the activism regarding people still struggling with addiction, you know, I would love to build something kind of around that and maybe build a network. Again, this is kind of like, I'm just kind of getting into the activism side of things now that, you know, I'm in my late 20s, and I've lived enough life to really kind of like have the motivation and do something about it. And so, yeah, I would really love to start the beginning phases of getting a network together of addicts who are either still in the organization, or, you know, have recently left or have been out for however long and are currently struggling, whether it be with addiction or mental health. And, you know, there's lots of things. I know we mentioned AA, but, you know, that, again, that's not the only option. There's things like, for me, I'm not the biggest AA guy. I've been to AA countless times. There's been times when I've gotten a lot from it. There's been times where it felt like, what am I doing here? I need to leave. For me, I'm a smart recovery guy, so they call it smart recovery. So like cognitive behavioral therapy worked wonders for me. Really understanding how my brains work, how my parents' brains work, how my grandparents' brains works, how it affects the lineage there.
You're talking generational trauma is what you were talking about. Oh, I love it. Obsessed with it.
That's me right there. I love all that stuff. So and it really helped me understand myself. And believe it or not, I learned this in rehab. So, you know, one of the best experiences of my life was actually this rehab in Palm Springs I went to called Phoenix Rising, that really just taught me a lot of these coping mechanisms, and where I really just dove really deep into cognitive behavioral therapy. So that's another option if you're someone, you know, out there.
We need you, sir. So whether or not you end up starting your own channel or however you want to, because one of the things that I do on this channel is, I know that my knowledge, of course, is limited, but I know a guy. And that's what I'm really grateful about the people who do come on this show, is this is honestly what I advocate. Do you have a gift or a skill or something you can share with people that you know that they're watching? And so now you're going to be a resource for people.
That is something like for the new, I call it a New Year's resolution, if you will, but the beginning stages of a channel that is going to be more dedicated to maybe the addiction side or the mental health aspect, or for anybody who is one of those people who find themselves alone in this new situation without the support system they once had.
Wow. Wow. And you know what makes it, doesn't matter that you're in your 20s or that you have life experience. I mean, it helps, but it's the fact that you have passion to do so. That's the number one thing, is we take our life experiences and we use it to help other people. And that's really part of the healing process here. So thank you so much for sharing what you've been through and what you're currently going through. And I say this a lot, is that I don't want the audience to be fooled. Like, I'm not some empowered, you know, I'm over it type of personality. That healing from trauma is a process, and it is not just a one-time event. So I think we're all in this together, even though it looks different for some of us.
Absolutely, we're all in this together. And I mean, I really have to thank people like yourself, you know, and people like Lloyd Evans, and people who, you know, really make it accessible for somebody like myself to go from, doing whatever I was doing to now being immediately immersed into this community and feeling like I've known you guys for years. Because in a weird way, we have, because we were all brought up in this. So we still kind of have that brother sister connection,
Yeah.
because we it's still there, So it's very interesting. That's kind of like a very unique way of looking at things in as far as this network is concerned. Very cool.
You know what's interesting about that fact? Like, I don't know if you're in the Reddit group or any of the other online groups, but when someone comes in, they've just woken up and they write their whole story. It's almost to the point now where I bet you can almost predict what they're going to say, how they're feeling. And because you're so, when you're in the organization and you're programmed to think that you're the problem, you don't realize how universal the wake up story actually is, how it really kind of, with nuances that are different for everybody. And of course it's individualized, but it really is a lot of the same things that we all go through, but we don't realize that we're on the inside. We sit and think it must be just me. I must be the problem. And you sit there and believe that, and you think you're the only one for a really long time, and it's not true.
This is I would say, like, as far as being a Jehovah's Witness, I got to see more than your average Jehovah's Witness. I mean, my dad was an elder. He would, my uncle was an HLC, so he would take me to sometimes the hospitals, and I'd like kind of shadow him and stuff. He took me to Bethel. I met Brother Lett, met Brother Mullenfont. I went in the governing body room where they have meetings back in Brooklyn before they sold it to I think Kushner or whatever.
But and you never like bought it. You never drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak.
I mean, I was more afraid than anything because, as a kid, you're flipping through, I forget what was my book of Bible stories is what it was. You're flipping through it and you're seeing all these the imagery of like Armageddon happening, and you're like, oh, that's my friend. Yeah, like, oh yeah. So that stuff was more of like the fear tactics that kind of kept me like within it. But as far as like believing looking back at the second I started looking back as far as seeing how the organization was made, I was like, oh no, like I immediately was like, no.
Wow. I wish I would have had that. I remember looking at death and destruction in the governing in the books, and I remember, of course, being afraid to die. One of the things that changed for me was I realized, and I know this is going to sound terrible because I love living, but if I did die at Armageddon, I'd be dead. I wouldn't know it. Right. So, and I started I say it with a smile. I know it sounds horrible for the average PME who might be watching this, but it's true. Like, they threaten you with death and you think, well, then I'd be dead. Like, I guess not having fear of death is what kind of helped me move forward from that. Like, if you're going to call death eternal sleep, then why are we afraid of it?
And I'm with you there too, because when I was in my coma, I felt like I was dead. Like I was, everything was black, and I couldn't move or walk or feel anything, and it was like that for days. And they were just pumping me with different drugs and stuff. So like, kind of coming out of that, I would just kind of, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, I'm not afraid to die, but like it kind of, that whole like thing they build up is just kind of gone. That wall is gone. You're like, oh.
So were you able to hear things? Were you cognizant of the world around you?
At times I was, it felt like a dream, but like it's, when you wake up from a dream and you're like, oh, okay, that was a dream. This was like, I kind of came out of it and it was like all those things really happened. Of course they had not, but it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like I had really lived all those dream-like sequences I was having when I was on like phenobarbital and like fentanyl, all kinds of stuff for like 2 weeks until I came out of it. But
so when you came out of it, and did it give you this newfound zeal for life? Is that what it felt like for you?
Not really, because I was still on so much drugs that I couldn't even think straight. I was still coming off of all these drugs, so I didn't really have the cognitive ability to be like, oh yeah, I'm coming out of this. But I did have the cognitive ability for when the doctors immediately came in and saw that I was doing okay, to be like, yes, give me plasma, give me whatever I need so that we can do this next procedure.
Man, what a story. Andrew, it has been such an honor having you on this channel, and I'm going to put your email address in the description box. To those of you in the audience who can relate to Andrew and you are struggling with the same things, or if you just want to ask some information, he has lovingly opened up the path for you to do so. So Andrew, thank you so much for being here, and maybe we'll have you on again where we can see how you're doing and check up on you, and we'd love to see what you're going to do in the future as far as activism goes. It's been an honor, really.
And I look forward, I'm sure I'll get in contact with you about maybe giving me some advice for starting this thing up,
Yeah.
because like I said, we're definitely going to be doing something for this next year for sure.
Definitely. And what we could do is we can have you on again, and then we can promote your channel and we can talk about what it is that you want to do as well.
Thank you so much for the work that you do. I mean, this is really, really going to be life changing for so many people. I know it already is for myself. It's incredibly liberating, and you don't really realize the impact you have on. I mean, I've been obsessed with just being a part of this community. I stay up late into the night I was watching Ken Mayo's experience last night. Like, I absolutely am enthralled with it. I love it. It for the first time in my life, I will say it feels really good to be a part of a community that truly has each other's best interests in mind.
Oh my God. It's, if I may just say, when I first woke up, thank you for saying that. I had the opportunity to be a guest on someone else's show. It was when I was first, I don't know what I'm doing. I am the one who said, I'm not going to be on YouTube. I'm just going to fade. And then when you start seeing that there's more of you out there, I can't tell you how much our community has just grown just by talking. Like, we're literally just having coffee virtually. And I remember watching other interviews and thinking, man, I feel like they get me more than the PMEs or the physically and mentally ins get me. So, now that we have all these people with different backgrounds, that is where the community is, a shared struggle and a shared experience.
And it truly feels like at the end of the day, we're fighting a winning battle right now. That's how, at least how I feel. I feel like we're truly fighting a winning battle right now. And that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, it takes one and then two, and then it duplicates, and then we just keep moving forward. But one of the things that I love about all of our guests is that we're talking about the healing process and how we're on the other side, or at least getting to the other side of that. Because I truly believe the best revenge is just be happy and to live your life and start making your own choices. Andrew, thank you so much for being on the show, and we're going to have you on again. Okay.
Awesome. I appreciate it so much. Again, feel free to leave everything in there. That was perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much. Made my day.
Thank you so much for watching the show, and don't forget to hit that little bell at the top of your screen to let you know that every time I do post a video, you'll get notified. And also don't forget, we have this cool little community over there on TikTok where we just have some interesting conversations in the comments. Also, I'm on Instagram. I know I'm everywhere, where I am wordy and I type a lot and blog, and you get a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on. You'll see like the who I really am as a human being, because I am a human being. And you'll see a lot of that in the Instagram stories. Oh, and if you want to be on the show, just email me, wendyrenee@gmail.com, or go to my website, wendyrenee.com, and click on that little button that says be on the show. So excited to have you, and I'm really looking forward to 2022 and meeting all of you. So that's all for now, and we'll see you next time.